Hello, Phalonians. I'm Lore Master Matt,
And I'm Phelan John.
and welcome to the Bellringers. From time to time, we're going to record a series on a special topic, and you'll find that in these sessions, the Bellringers. The Lord Mayor of Teradim, Varain Qualtara, employs many young people, generally waifs and strays like John and I, to roam throughout Teradim, ringing a bell and shouting proclamations from the Lord Mayor or the news of the day. Besides a daily stipend, bellringers are often stopped on the streets by the affluent of Teradim and asked to give the news to them personally, for which they receive a copper or two for their time. We are your bellringers, and today the news is a starting point for lore and your journey through the world of Phalon.
Last week we left off by talking about the people and places of Phalon, and we're really excited because this week we're going to dive into the actual factions, the actual kingdoms of the world of Phalon. And today we're going to start with Phalon John's favorite, Falkaar. So let's start our conversation, John, with the history of Falkaar going way back to the beginning of the establishing of that nation.
Sure. Greetings, everyone. First of all, I know that everybody wants Falkaar to be my favorite, and I guess that's true. If I had to pick, I love all factions equally. But I think we've established in one of the podcast episodes, that it was the original country for the civilized country for the basis of adventuring my original role-playing group back in the midst of time. So I'm not going into too much detail there, but it was a while ago. As we said, I think, check me if I'm wrong here, Lore Master Matt, the first one of these we talked about how, while there are other ancestries, one of the major themes of Phalon is the meeting, the clash, doesn't have to be a clash, but the meeting of the three great populations, Simkur coming from the east, Chalor coming up from the south, and Phalor coming from the northwest.
Yep, we talked about that.
And so Falkaar highlights two of those. When recorded history, as far back as we generally take it, there was an empire built around the southern continent called the Kryjan Empire. And they have conquered the southern continent and invaded the northern one. A couple thousand years ago was their peak. So they own strips of land, provinces on the southern coast of the northern continent. Up in the northwest corner of the northern continent are the tribes of the Urtigar. Okay, and that's the origin of the Phalor people. And I was thinking about this. I was driving today thinking about this episode. I was going to say, these we talk about them civilizing, but I think that's kind of that's kind of a passé term. I don't think there's anything. How important is your civilization? There's a lot to like about this so-called barbarian civilization. I'm sleeping under the stars. I'm hunting stuff. They're generally perceived as more free. I'm not tied to the land necessarily, tied to a specialized task. What they are not back in that time period is urban or agrarian. So we'll leave the discussion about whether the Urtigar is civilized to, for Urtigar and non-Urtigar to fight it out over a beer at the pub. But they are, not agrarian. So that's a limiter on your population from a demographic standpoint. If you don't have an agrarian culture, the amount of food that you need, you can't generally support it. Hunter-gathering, you're kind of limited there. That's all social sciences stuff. I've had some great social scientists, have had and still have some great social scientists in my life to kind of check my work on that. But blah, blah, blah. So the Urtigar up there, 18 tribes, they're running around doing cool, what we call barbarian things. They are not heavily armored, don't live in cities, live under the open sky, hunter-gatherer culture, don't have an agrarian society. And a wolf chieftain somewhat more than 1,000 years ago, named Jarav Korsar, is captured in a battle with the Trazarites, because the Trazarites in that interim space have rebelled against the Kryjan, conquered the empire, and taken those provinces. So just basically put them under new management, right? So the provinces are a strip along the southern coast of the northern continent, where things like Corona and Thormanol and Teradum are now, were Kryjan at one point and then taken by the Trazarites as part of the rebellion. So the high water mark of that is the city of Tirena, what's called Tirena now, on the west coast of the Inner Sea. And Jarav is captured and taken there, and held as a prisoner for ransom and whatever else, hostage, and experiences a city for the first time. And at that point, Tirena's fairly sophisticated. It's got a wall around it. People are specialized. It's got farmland supporting the population. He sees this and he's like, this might be better, than what we're doing. Convinces a number of other chieftains of his rank, in several of the tribes, not representative of all 18, but the Wolf tribe and some others, and decides to go to war against the Trazarites and wins. So the story of the birth of Falkaar is an Erdegar chieftain uniting a bunch of clans, heading south to the sea, and defeating the Trazarites that live there, from the coast of the Great Western Ocean in the west to the Inner Sea in the east, and south to the Shining Sea in the south, and the boundary basically between what becomes Falkaar and the Erdegar tribes, the Moonshadow Mountains, a mountain range that moves across, cuts that kind of major piece of the western part of the northern continent in half. And the Falkarans are the people that originated as these clans, form a nation, make him the king, and 1,000 years, of Korsar rule. So the current queen of Falkaar is a direct descendant of the original king. And that gives us some things, because some people claim, because this is they're my favorite, it's not technically true, but generally speaking, if you're making your world building, you got to pick your calendar. You got to pick your common tongue, right? So the calendar that we tend to use in talking about Phelan is the Falkaran calendar. So it's the year 1005 right now. That means it was 1,005 years ago that they put a crown on Jarav Korsar, and he was elevated from a chieftain of the Wolf tribe to king of a new nation, a Falkaar nation, having driven the Trazarites into the ocean.
Awesome. So let's talk for a minute about the government they formed. So we've already established that he's a king. How did he organize Falkaar, and how does that play out today?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the word enlightened is the right word, but it probably applies. His experience, pretty bright guy, his experience of watching what a combination of watching what the Trazarites were doing in terms of their society, and what his own experience was as a chieftain, clan chieftain of the Wolf tribe, and said, there's some mistakes here I don't want to make, right? And his crew, who are all clan chieftains, that came with him, are all become his original nobility, right? And their descendants, generally speaking, their descendants are still in power today in the various baronies and duchies of Falkaar. And they get together and decide, talk about, hey, we're not going to do things exactly the way the Trazarites did it. We're going to bring some of our own traditions and try to make it the best of all worlds. Erdegar society, women are not treated as second-class citizens. They kept that, as opposed to the way that and the Trazerites will tell you they don't treat them as second-class citizens, but, putting them on a pedestal is a nice way of saying we treat them as second-class citizens. And so equal right to rule, equal right to own property. There's many female clan chieftains as there are men. There are a couple of good stories currently housed in World Anvil. We'll need to get them into a new platform. We're going to move away from that. But there is a brief one about the last fight in Lormouth when they take the last city. There's another one where one of his chieftains, a female chieftain, takes the Eyrie at Tlar without knowing it's there and capturing the Parakeer, what become the Parakeer. So, Trazerites were flying Daklos Ravagers out of that spot, and they take it in a surprise raid. They didn't even know it's there. They're just taking it because Tlar's the next castle to take, and holy cats, what's this, So that's why Falkaar has that, because that's the one location that they were found in at the time all these places were captured. So these people get together and say, okay, we're going to have a king, we're going to have a monarch, a king or a queen, but the nobles are going to have a significant say, and they just modeled their decision-making process on the way their war council worked during the course of the war against the Trazerites that captured Falkaar in the first place. And so a sufficient number of the senior nobles can modify a decision by the king. And they also have some rules about marriages. If you marry, you can marry whoever you want, but if you marry outside of the Falkaran people, you can't, keep your rights to whatever hereditary lands, etc., because there was too much of that going on, both in the Trazerite society and his own, where you had a wolf clansman marries a serpent princess, and he dies, and the serpent comes in and takes over a piece of the wolf tribe, and mess, just mess. And so there was also a problem inside the Trazerite Empire. So you can marry whoever you want, but you abrogate some rights if you do. That way you don't have a chunk of, like the whole 100 Years' War, basically, the kind of thing where, you have a person from one country married to a person from another country, and one of them passes away or things change, and all of a sudden that piece you were living on belongs to someone else's country. He was not into that. None of them were. So they take that organization that they had. So pretty egalitarian, but more enlightened, less authoritarian than Herodel turns out to be.
Right.
Possibly less so than Thormanol, so kind of in the middle.
Okay.
So.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us. Next time, we're going to cover some more Falkaar. We're going to talk about their religion, and we're going to talk about their military and a little bit of their economy. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate you listening in. And until next time, we'll see you around the table.
Osakaba.